What's up? This is Brandon London, and you're listening to the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. You hear that? The Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. Let's go, Giants.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to the latest edition of the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast in association with Andy's Man Club. Lads, remember, it is okay to talk. This episode, we are 100% British and, as always, 100% Giants. It's time for a different double act this week, as Shane has returned, but I've substituted in for Kev. And we're going to have a look at our upcoming game against the Saints. For any of those eagle-eyed viewers who noticed that the intro has returned back to the non-jankiness that it was on Tuesday, that is a nice Canva issue that I have been able to resolve. I was watching live on Tuesday. It was Tuesday, wasn't it? Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I can't remember when you did it.
Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday. And it threw me for a loop. So apologies, Shane. I'm sure that set the producing up perfectly as it decided to change itself on the fly. Apart from that, though, 2 double acts this week. How are you doing?
Yeah, man, all good. It feels very rare that I get to do the double act. Usually I'm the one that's missing out at least one episode. So it just felt quite nicely this week. I've had the joys of 4 a.m. Get-ups. Yes, Steve, I don't think I'm going to be getting the job full time, put it that way. I've had the joys of 4 a.m. get up, so I'm available all this week, and it's been good kind of talking. Great chatting to Kev. Looking forward to chatting to you, and of course, missing Dan.
Yeah, I watched back the episode on Wednesday. Really enjoyed it. Had some great comments come in through the chat, and some great talk about some of the players who potentially, don't get the love quite as often as they deserve. Especially players like Aishan Robinson and Darnay Holmes, who both got well-deserved shout-outs. Now, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, if you're watching it live on YouTube or Facebook, please do pop any predictions or questions into the comments. We will try and get to any questions as quickly as we can, and obviously predictions, as normal, will come up at the end of the prediction part. Obviously, subscribe if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the notification bell. To steal a quote from Carl Banks, tell a friend, tell your dog, whoever you want to tell. We get a lot of analytics through this, and we really do appreciate anyone who does sort of subscribe or give us a thumbs up, because it helps put us on the front page for other Giants fans to find us. So appreciate that. Also, don't forget, on Sunday night, we will be in Dublin for our meetup at Buskers on the Ball in the Temple Bar area. So let us know if you are attending. We'll have a £25 gift voucher from USA Sports to give away, as well as a podcast T-shirt. Immediately after this podcast, I will start packing because my flight is tomorrow morning, and I've got a 7:45 train in the morning to go and meet Dan. So that should be good crack. While we're on the subject of USA Sports as well, don't forget Big Blue gets you 10% off on any merchandise on there. So Shane, before we get into the Saints team and what they're going to be all about this weekend, let's have a look at some of the goings on. So yesterday, the Giants designated tight end Darren Waller to return from IR. Waller, who suffered his hamstring injury early in the October 29th game against the Jets, was placed on IR on November 4th. At the time, he was the Giants' leading receiver with 36 catches for 384 yards and a touchdown. However, he has since been overtaken by Darius Slayton, who has 448 yards, but does still rank as our second best receiver in yards, which is crazy to think after he's missed essentially 5 weeks. Now, Waller's likely to have a pitch count on Sunday against the Saints, so, expectations should be tempered. But, if we make that playoff run, that I can't believe we're talking about this late in the season after what's happened, how important is it going to be to have Waller back in that offense?
Yeah, I think it's going to be massive, not just because of what he can produce kind of on the field, but he's off the field as well. He's got that experience He's that kind of veteran leader. And if you look at what Tommy DeVito's been doing, I don't want to get saying with like a poor cast, but like as good as Wandale and Jalen's been, and even Darius Slayton's shown flashes in Isaiah Hodgins, we would all agree none of them are a true number one, and that's what Darren Waller was brought in for. So it's a little bit exciting to kind of see, okay, what can Tommy do with a bit more of a versatile weapon? Could you refer to him as that potentially? Kind of, this player that he can target, in particular in the red zone, and it'd be interesting to see kind of what Darren looks like coming back. Obviously, he's coming off the hamstring injury. Hamstring injury can be a little bit sensitive. So like you say, he's probably going to be on a pitch count or snap count. The key thing for me is kind of not pushing him, because I think even without Darren Waller, this is a winnable game. Like no question about it. So you don't need to necessarily throw Darren in the deep end where he could potentially end up aggravating his hamstring again, especially when you got Rams and Eagles twice coming up as well. So, like I said, I'd be interested to see how Tommy can connect with him, the chemistry, and maybe he's that kind of big target that Tommy's been missing these last few weeks. Because, like I say, the other guys, as great as they've performed, we would all admit they're not true number ones.
No, and while we have been able to move the ball and pick up hundreds of yards of offense in some of the games, don't forget the Patriots and the Jets games were torrid affairs offensively, and maybe you just need that person in there to be that spark, because I don't think DeVito's thrown for more than 250 since he's been in, so it's not like we are an offensive powerhouse in the passing game. So just bringing him in is obviously going to help. Now, one other thing just to remember on this as well, for Waller's sake, is there's probably a little bit of pressure on him to perform over the next few weeks, because I'm pretty sure we have a get out of that contract next year that doesn't cost us a lot. And if he doesn't show anything, there's always that potential that this is kind of like a one and done, and it was an experiment that didn't work. Do you feel like he is going to have to almost prove himself again to the Giants fans to say yes, he should be here next season?
To the fans, maybe, but I don't think he's got to do that to the front office and the coaches. I think they're going to be happy. I don't know his full contract details, but I think we did push some money into the year after, potentially, just to give us a little bit more breathing room in terms of cap space earlier in the season. But maybe he feels like he's got something to prove. But I think that's more towards the fans. I think Joe Shane, Dave or Kafka, I think they're going to know the kind of player that he is, and they're probably telling him that, look, we know what you can do. Been a little unfortunate with injuries. That's why we're not going to force you out in on Sunday night and make you play 50, 60, whatever snaps it might be. It could be something similar to Dex, where he only plays 49, 50% of the snaps. But I don't think he's probably going to feel the pressure. And I think deep down he's probably thinking he maybe does owe something to his teammates, probably more than the fans, in all honesty, but the fans as well. But it'd be good to see him out there. It'd be good to see number 12 on the field, and love to see him come back with a touchdown as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just having a look at over the cap here. Cap King Kev is not obviously with us, so he would probably understand this more than we would. But if you look at a pre-June 1st cut on Darren Waller, you're looking at 7.3 million dead and just over 7 million in cap savings. If you look at a post-June 1st cut, 2.5 in dead and 12 mil in cap savings. So it's that's not chump change. That's a fair whack. I do know that the Giants, I think, are projected to be around about 60 million in the black in the terms of their cap space. So there's fair amount available there. But we all know what happens when it comes to the end of the preseason, and what happens with players there, and how the cap has to be juggled. So maybe something to keep an eye on. But like you said, it's probably more of a fan look at the Darren Waller situation than what the front office will likely be looking at. So If we move on to the second bit of news, as we've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, one of the biggest shining lights of the season has been the progression of Kayvon Thibodeau, and it looks like former NFL quarterback Robert Griffin III agrees. His tweet on Wednesday, as you can see on the screen, said Kayvon Thibodeau got a lot of hate last year, has 11.5 sacks this year, more QB pressures, tackles for loss, forced fumbles, and quarterback hits than last year in fewer games. Watch the tape and you will see he is that dude. The apologies need to be as loud as the disrespect was. Now, this comes off the back of the criticism from the WFAN host Sal and Brandon earlier this season, where Giants legend Coles Banks defended him on that infamous show that he was kicked off at the tail end of October. Kayvon himself did actually send a tweet out on X. I think you still call them tweets, even though it's not called Twitter. He said, "Thanks for the recognition, but I'm not a victim, and prove people wrong. Narratives are old. I'm playing good football and consistently getting better. Let's stop hanging on to old headlines." What do you think, Shane? Do you think that RG3's right there, that Kayvon deserves an apology for the hate that he did have to put up for last year? Or do you agree with Tibbs that, you know, you kind of live in the here and now and that's what you focus on?
I mean, in all honesty, I don't really agree with either of them because, I mean, I don't know, maybe I've just got a short memory, but I don't really remember Kayvon getting much hate last year. Now, there was a lot of criticism coming his way at the start of this season, saying, you know, he was the number 5 overall pick and you want to see better from him. And, you know, yeah, that is true. But, I mean, I don't remember any. I could be wrong, and if someone can remember in particular, then, you know, yeah, feel free to correct me. That's absolutely fine. But I don't remember any of us on here saying that Thibodeau was a bust last year. It's his rookie season, for God's sake. So we're not expecting him to come in and put up double-digit sacks. That'd be like absolutely ridiculous. And you know, I think Kayvon's attitude and response to it is absolutely perfect. Like, if you want to see the perfect response, that's what you want to see. You know, he's saying, "Yeah, thanks for the recognition, but I'm not a victim. I'm just playing good football." So you know, like he says, let's stop hanging on to headlines. You know, did he have room to improve last year? Yes, I think, like we said on here, he improved as the season went on last year, and he's kind of done that this year as well. You know, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, Thibodeau wasn't great, but in all fairness, neither was the defense. Like, you know, as great as the defense has been in the recent weeks, the first few weeks of the season, they were pretty dreadful. There was missed tackles everywhere. There was mistakes. So, you know, I don't think it's anything at Kayvon directly, but I would not say he got hate last year. He got a bit of unfair criticism this year, which was not so much as criticism. It was just saying, look, we want to see a little bit more. It's his second season. And, you know, I don't see the problem in saying that. At the end of the day, you know, people are just voicing their opinions, just like we do on here and everybody else does on Twitter or X or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the kind of last year chatter was more around the comparisons to the other players taken around that kind of time. Aiden Hutchinson obviously was an absolute animal last year. He's been very good again this year. And I think you'll find that you're right. I didn't construe it as hate last year. I just think that some people criticised him because of where he was drafted and the expectation that they had for him. Bear in mind, I still don't think he gets called for any of the holds that he should be, and that was something we saw last year. I just think he's become a smarter player this year, and he's been able to kind of find ways to get out of that. And he does deserve his flowers. You know, he really has come on leaps and bounds. I know that you're not a massive fan of the popularity contest that is the Pro Bowl, but he is quite high up in the Pro Bowl rankings for outside linebackers, and I think it would be a nice kind of reward for him for what he's done this season to actually have Pro Bowler on his resume for this year. Anything to add on those 2 points before we have a look at the Saints?
No, just that if you've got an opinion that's not popular with other people, it doesn't make it hate. It's just an opinion. And I'll be honest, RG3 does annoy me with some of the little rants that he goes on Twitter. Like, you know, he seems like an absolute great guy and he's got the backing of a lot of players and that, but he seems to lead a lot of witch hunts that weren't witch hunts to begin with. and it just makes situations. He turns situations into a witch hunt, and he makes situations worse than it was. Like I say, he didn't get any hate last year, not in my opinion. Certainly didn't get any hate from me. He might have got criticism, but criticism is not hate. You know, I criticised the Wandale Robinson draft pick, but when he does well, I say, yeah, he's done well. Doesn't mean I hate Wandale Robinson. So, you know, just because you've got a different opinion to other people, it doesn't make you a hater or a keyboard warrior or whatever people want to refer to him as.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Right, Sunday's game then. The Saints broke a 3-game losing streak last weekend as they beat the worst team in the NFL this season, the Carolina Panthers. That win takes their season total to 6-7, which scarily is good enough to be joint leaders of the NFC South, along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. I think they've called us the NFC least. I'm not sure if there's a play on words that any of our listeners and watchers want to try and come up for the NFC South, but NFC sloth maybe is probably the closest that I can come up with, but it's not looking great. As many of you will know, my wife is a Saints fan, so I have a very vested interest in seeing how well they do, because it obviously affects her mood as much as the Giants affects my mood. So I do kind of know a bit more about the Saints than maybe some of the other teams that are around. But Shane, it's over to you, mate. Saints offense.
Just before I do, have you and the missus got a bit of a wager going on? Like, you need to get a bet going on, like loser has to wear the other person's jersey the following week or something like that. There's got to be something going on there.
I think after I made her sit up in the gods in MetLife in the rain when we were in the press box, I don't have a leg to stand on with any of that kind of shenanigans. So I'm going to keep myself quiet, especially seeing as I'm abandoning her to go to Dublin as well. So.
Yeah, that's very true. So yeah, onto the Saints and their offense. So offensively, the Saints are ranked 13th in the league with an average of 337.5 yards per game. They also record an average of 233 through the air and just over 104 yards on the ground. The quarterback position is quite interesting in New Orleans. Obviously, Drew Brees is no longer there. You've had we'll call it trials and tribulation of Taysom Hill. I don't know what Taysom Hill is. Is he a tight end? Is he a quarterback? Is he a receiver? No one really knows. And then obviously they had Jameis Winston, who didn't get to meet many W's in his time in New Orleans. So they signed Derek Carr in free agency the off-season. And he's sort of come for a little bit of stick from Saints fans multiple times this season as well. He started all 13 games, throwing for 2,880 yards. 13 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, but you know, he's occasionally tactically swapped, we'll call it, in favour of the versatile Taysom Hill. In terms of the backfield and their running game, Alvin Kamara, who I feel like Alvin Kamara is around years and just never seems to get any older. Like, I feel like he's just constantly like 27, 28 years old, but he's been in the league for like 10 years, it feels like. He's got 564 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns in 10 games this season. Outside of Kamara, though, the Saints' rushing attack has been pretty disappointing. Their other 3 backs combined being outgained by, you guessed it, Mr. Versatile himself, Taysom Hill. In terms of the receiving game and their wide receivers, their biggest weapon is Chris Olave, the second-year player. He's had 918 yards on 72 receptions with 4 touchdowns, and he's in the top 20 for both receiving yards and PFF grade. And just behind Olave is Rashid Shaheed, who's had 434 yards. He's getting an average of 16.2 yards per reception. In terms of the O-line, their O-line ranks 21st according to PFF, with their weakness being the left side. Their left tackle leads the team in quarterback hits allowed with 7 and 26 overall pressures. Also leads the team behind right tackle Ryan Ramczyk, who has 25. Guessing their left tackle's Trevor Penning.
I can't remember actually who their left
tackle is. Another drafted Trevor Penning last year. So that took Olave and Penning. So yeah, the left side of their O-line's a bit of an issue for them. So obviously the players that we've spoke about there, Chris Olave, you know, you've got to look at Chris Olave as a Giants fan with a little bit of envy, because, you know, what would absolutely love to have a Chris Olave on this team. Like you seen where he was drafted, and he's kind of proved to be worth that pick. I think he was a top 10, top 12 pick, I want to say.
Yeah.
He is absolutely stunned player, and if memory serves right, I think he was out of Ohio State. I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
But it appears he's unlikely to play this weekend, which is absolutely a bonus for us. How much of a bonus do you think it is for the Giants?
It's massive, isn't it? I mean, we haven't really had a top tier receiver go up against Banks or Adoree other than the Cowboys game since DeVito's come in, really. I mean, against the Jets, it would have been Garrett Wilson, but obviously their quarterback situation is dire. I think the Packers, it would have been Christian Watson, but he was out. The Patriots, I couldn't even name their number one receiver. So, other than what happened against the Cowboys, we haven't really come up against anyone like Olave. And the weird thing is that Olave's he's kind of got it all. Like, he has the shiftiness, he has the safe hands, he has the speed. He can make the difficult catches, he can make contested catches. He really does make that offense tick. I guarantee that Drew Brees wishes he had Olave on as one of his receivers, because he is that good. And I think for him to not suit up, which is what it's looking likely to be. I mean, he hasn't practiced for three straight practices now. It was released earlier. I think it was Brooke Kirknoffer, who's one of the Saints sort of beat writers, who said that Olave hadn't been seen at all today, and she didn't expect him to play Sunday. So I think it's probably safe that we can say that he doesn't. Now, another interesting wrinkle is you're talking about the offensive line there, Ryan Ramczyk. He hasn't practiced for a second straight day either, so that could be their right tackle who's out. So that's two massive players for the Saints potentially missing. And I think I was watching the Talking Giants earlier, and they were talking about how Derek Carr and Saints office really struggled with blitzes and like being able to read the blitz game. And who are they up against this weekend? But blitz master Wink Martindale. So it's going to be. I think it could be a tough game for the Saints. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I think the draft with Olave was probably just before I joined the podcast, but I assume you did the same. You did your research on him, ranked him amongst the other wide receivers. What were your thoughts of him coming out of college? And one thing that I saw earlier, Olave caught passes from Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State, so he'd been around for a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was an absolute class player in college for Ohio State. 2021 was his last year, and he went for 936 yards and 13 touchdowns. You're talking 12, 13 games. So, he was pretty good. He was definitely in my top 5. I think I might have had him at 2 or 3, but I mean, if everyone knows I've got certain players, so I've got certain positions from certain schools that I'm like, yeah, I'm avoiding them. I'm not avoiding Ohio State wide receiver, like their wide receivers. I mean, you had Michael Thomas that the Saints drafted, who went to Ohio State. Just as he's now dropping off the cliff, they've drafted another Ohio State wide receiver. He like I said earlier on, you look at it and you just think, oh man, I wish we had a Chris Olave on our team, because, like I say, he is like absolute class. Like, anyone would want him in their team. If he was on the Giants, he would be wide receiver 1. Like, it wouldn't even be close. And you start thinking, oh, what would it be like having a Darren Waller, a Chris Olave, Slayton as a 2, Wandale in the slot, Barkley in the backfield. It just all starts to sound all familiar again, though. The similar conversations we're having in the off season, but we've not got that wide receiver 1. But I think it's a massive boost. I mean, in one way, I'm kind of disappointed he's not playing, because you want to see Banks go up against
Yeah.
And I'm sure Deontay Banks is probably thinking, I would have liked to have played him. I mean, I will see if I can find it very quickly whilst we're chatting at some point. But like Olave did go up against Maryland in his last year at college, so I'd be interested to see whether he lined up against Deontay Banks and how they got on at college. Obviously, they're not going to have it this year, but I'm sure Banks is disappointed because Banks believes in himself, as we've kind of seen over the last couple of days with the chain that he brought. He's getting a little bit of cockiness, just enough at the minute that doesn't put me off, but let's not teach it over the edge. So Banks believes in his ability, and I'm sure he's disappointed that he can't go up against one of the league's best young up and coming wide receivers. But in terms of the Giants, it's going to be a massive benefit. I mean, you look at their receivers outside. I mean, so you've got Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. He's had 33 receptions for 434 yards. Thomas is on IR. Tyson Hill, not going to count him. Your next wide receiver is rookie A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest, who went in the 5th round. Now, I did like A.T. Perry, but he's only had 5 catches on 10 targets this year. So, it's a depleted wide receiver core for New Orleans. And I think the key very well could end up being trying to stop Alvin Kamara. Like Bobby Okereke could have his work cut out for him because, you imagine the ball's going to go through Kamara 70-80% of the time on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll have a look at their defense next. So defensively, the Saints rank 13th, which is the same spot as their offense. They have allowed 321 yards per game, 131.5 of them on the ground. However, their 189.5 yards per game through the air is the 7th best in the league. On the line, Saints veteran Cam Jordan may have lower than normal sack numbers, but his 36 overall pressures leads the team, with fellow edge rusher Carl Granderson being just behind on 32. Granderson is in fact that sack leader for the Saints with 7. Linebacker Demario Davis, who I've got to admit, because as I said, I watch the Saints more often than most other teams other than the Giants. He's one player I really like on their defense is Demario Davis. I think he does a lot for them. He is everywhere. No surprise that he's consistently in that top 100 players of the season. He's always getting all pro votes. However, he is aging. I think he's 34 now, so there's not going to be many years left, and obviously he'll probably hit that wall at some point. But he's definitely someone to look out for in the passing and the running game. 20 pressures and 6 sacks, both rank in the top 5 amongst Saints players in the pass rush, and his 85.5 run defense score is the highest on the team. So he really does do it all for the Saints. Now, there is that kind of thing where if he was to go down injured, the Saints defense probably crumbles. So that is not something that they want to happen. However, in the backfield, the Saints really, really are probably the most dangerous on their defense. 17 interceptions on the season, which is 3rd best in the league. Paulson Adebo is leading the way player-wise, which he has 4, which puts him joint 4th most in the league with about 4 other players. Adebo also has 14 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles. He also allows a quarterback rating of 54 when thrown his way. So he really is the star in the backfield. Don't forget, they also have the honey badger, Tyrann Mathieu, who just seems to have been around forever and doesn't really let his play drop off. He is an absolute monster in pretty much all 3 phases of the game. So he'll be another one to look out for. We've seen DeVito rip it when needed, as evidenced by his game-winning drive last week. But against a team who are obviously vastly superior against the pass than anything we've seen in the last few weeks, is it time that we finally get our ground-based attack going? Which seems like a question I think we've asked 13 times this season, and it's never actually happened.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you'd be a brave man to try and pass. I mean, Paulson Adebo was someone who I was very high on coming out of Stanford back in 2021. I think I had him at CB5 and he went in the third round, which was a massive surprise to me. Like, I thought he was a very, very underrated cornerback in that draft class. And, you know, he's playing kind of lights out, really. I mean, you look at his stats, he's been targeted 58 times. He's given up 34 receptions for 473 yards, but he's not giving up any touchdowns, and he's had 31 tackles with only 2 being missed. So, you know, he's not just a coverage corner, he's a corner that can tackle as well. So he's one to watch out for. I mean, obviously you got Marshawn Lattimore as well. You know, we was talking just about Ohio State wide receivers, but, you know, Lattimore was out of Ohio State a few years ago, and, you know, at one point he's probably one of the best cornerbacks in the league. So I think when you throw them two in, Alontae Taylor's not playing too bad either, and like you say, you got Tyrann Mathieu, and let's not forget they've also, in case anyone was unaware, they've got someone called Isaac Yiadom, cornerback as well. Might be familiar for some Giants fans. So yeah, you know, I think as well, next to Tyrann Mathieu, they've got Marcus May. I don't think he's been playing that often, but he was a player I liked quite a lot when he was in New York with the Jets. So I think, you know, as good as their run defense is, and, you know, we talk about Isaac Yiadom, he's the second highest rated run defense grade of a Saints player. And, you know, Paulson Adebo's up there as well. Say doesn't miss many tackles. So yeah, I'd focus on running. And I've got to be honest with you, I think obviously we mentioned Saquon Barkley the other night. He fumbled. He's not going to forget that. He's going to want to, you know, prove that, you know what, give me the ball, put the ball in my hands, better ball security. And obviously we're not looking to be at Quest Diagnostic Centre this week, but I won't be surprised if he maybe been focusing on that a little bit, and, you know, kind of a lot of ball carrying drills, being tackled. He's going to want to make sure that doesn't happen again this week. And, you know, what better way than to give him the ball, say, 25, 30 times and say, you know what, Sunday's gone, forget about it. Go and get 3-4 rushing touchdowns.
You wanting a is it Christmas Day Alvin Kamara kind of performance from Barkley? I think that was when Kamara got his 4 touchdowns that one year. It was a little Christmas Day treat for Saints fans. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I'll just have a quick look. I mean, I feel like Barkley's not had any massive games this season.
No.
You know, just probably so his best stats that he's had this season has been on the ground against the Jets. He had 128 yards, but, you know, he's only had 3 touchdowns on the season, and 2 of them was Sunday. So, you know, Sunday was probably his kind of best season. 86 yards for 2 touchdowns, 3 catches on 4 targets for 15 yards. So, you know, let's get Saquon involved a little bit more. You know, game in the run game in the pass game as well. You know, it's not going to be down to the cornerbacks too much to be able to cover him out the backfield. So, you know, yeah, let's get Saquon involved more and utilise him, because I feel like he's not been utilised as much as or the production not been there probably to the way he would want it to be in terms of, like, you know, the touchdowns he's been getting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the offensive line hasn't really helped Saquon in that aspect. I don't want to speak poorly of the offensive line, because I do feel like they are getting better. We are finally getting somewhere with it. Pass protection is better than it has been. Obviously, Tommy DeVito definitely added a wrinkle to that on Monday night. However, in the run game, we've been pretty poor all season. It's not like any of our other running backs have really done much. Wandale pops off the odd sort of nice big run, but that's mostly on you know, stuff where he's motioned into the backfield. So it would be nice to have a dominant game. Now, while mentioning that, we kind of do have to mention that JMS was given on Good Morning Football an award for good technique, essentially, where he opened up a really nice running lane for Saquon on Monday night, where he was able to, you know, take his man, hand him off to one of the guards, and then hit one of the linebackers, allowing Saquon to kind of burst through. I think it was Saquon who burst through the line there. So there are improvements there, but against a Saints team who tend to stand off the run rather than attack the run like a lot of teams do, he could see a bit more success even if it's just chipping away, little chippy yards, kind of 3.9. I think was that his average the other night, 3.9. I might be completely wrong there, but they're the sort of numbers you want.
Saquon was 4.3's average.
4.3. So that's kind of what you want, isn't it? You got 3 downs to get 10 yards. 4.3 is perfect, really. So that's going to be what we're looking for now. We were going through all the cornerbacks there, and you mentioned about May, and you mentioned about Yiadom. There is one player we haven't mentioned. I didn't actually look at his stats, surprisingly, considering what he does offer to the Saints and how good he has been in his career. But Marshawn Lattimore, have you got his stats there, Shane?
Yeah, so Lattimore on this season, he's played 10 games, 46 targets for 27 receptions, 317 yards, 1 interception and 1 touchdown.
So he's always seems to have been that consistent player for the Saints, the one who's always gone up against Mike Evans. I mean, their battles have always been entertaining to watch as a neutral. So they do have a very good backfield, and I think that's kind of why we are talking about Saquon so much, because we do see him being that kind of person. I'm going to switch things around in our kind of running order, because normally we would do the injury report before we do the game changers. But I guess while we're on the talking about Saquon, is he your hopeful game changer for this week on offense, or are you going to look in a different direction?
No, I mean, there's a couple of directions I could look in, but like I say, I think Saquon's going to be the key to this week. Like I say, New Orleans have got very good cornerbacks, very good DBs. You've got to show a little bit of respect there. Mm-hmm. Like I say, you tie that in with the fact that Saquon might kind of feel like he's got a little bit of a point to prove after that fumble that didn't cost us on Sunday, but on another night it very well might, and I feel like he's going to have a little bit of a points proof. So yeah, I'm going to go for Saquon. First game this season, he has both receiving and rushing touchdowns.
What about on the defense?
I'm kind of going to go for the same kind of trail of thought. I was going to go for Sexy Dexy, but I thought, I pick him every week as my player of the game. I can't start picking him as my game changer. So, offensively for the Giants, I'm going to go for the running back. Defensively for the Giants, I'm going to go for the guy that's going to stop their running back, and that's going to be Bobby Okereke, stopping Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara is going to be their biggest weapon, as we've mentioned with the injuries they've got, the wide receiver group. So, Bobby always, he's kind of had a quiet few weeks compared to what he'd had prior to that. Like, he's still performed very well the last few weeks, but ever since that Washington game, he's not been as active. Obviously, he'd had a few forced fumbles and a couple of back passes that led to 2 interceptions. He had the pick against New England. That was the one we watched in the booth, Rory.
Yeah, that was the one where we were in the booth and we were.
I mean, that's why I've kind of forgot that, because I was in awe of everything that was happening here. I kind of got distracted from what was happening out there. But like I say, Bobby Okereke, it's not a knock on Bobby. I just like to see him be more active again and kind of that leader. So yeah, I'm going to go for Bobby Okereke on defense.
It's interesting as well, because Bobby could have quite easily had an interception on Monday night. Funny enough, the ball that Kayvon tipped in the air was actually heading straight for Bobby's hands. So he could have quite easily had another one there if it wasn't for the fact that the Kayvon got the hand to it. So he has been, from the free agency side, probably the Giants' best free agency signing in a decade, maybe. I don't even think that's a shocking thing to say either. He has literally been, Carl Banks talks about it all the time. He's the best free agent pickup since Antonio Pierce, who was obviously the interim manager or interim head coach over at the Raiders. So I don't really think there's been anyone that you could really say has had such an impact so early.
No, I think it's funny you mentioned that, because I was listening to the Giants Insider on my way into work this morning, and Jerry Foley said exactly the same. Bobby Okereke is probably the best free agent pickup. I think it was since Antonio Pierce. He said, well, not 100%, but he definitely said he was the best in kind of, like you say, a decade plus, and he's easily been the best free agency pickup in in my short time as a Giants fan, and I've been screaming out for the Giants to draft a linebacker for years, and we've done it always in the middle to late rounds. So if you can't draft a linebacker in the first round or the second round, the next best option, go out and get one in free agency. And look, we've praised Bobby Okereke multiple times on this podcast this season, especially sort of once we've got the first, say, 2 or 3 weeks out the way, and he seemed to settle into the system and get his head round everything. And again, he's another one a little bit like Dex. He's been Mr. Consistent for us. He's been solid. You've not gone, oh, Bobby, you've got to do better than that. Like, he's been really solid, and long may it continue.
Yeah. So defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go for a cheeky best of the season game for Ojulari. I feel like he's slowly starting to get healthy. I don't think he's been fully healthy the last few weeks, but he sort of showed a few flashes against the Packers. He had half a sack, which I think he shared with Dex. He had a few tackles as well in there. So I just feel like a lot of the attention might go Thibodeau's way, and maybe Azeez kind of shows up what he has done in the 2 years previous to this, where he's sneakily been that kind of dominant pass rusher that we weren't actually expecting from him. And then on the offensive side of things, I'm not going to go Wan'Dale for the same reason that you didn't go for Dex, because I seem to just be an absolute Wan'Dale homer at the moment, but he's kind of proving me right every week. I think on offense, I'm going to go for JMS. I feel like he's had a sneaky underrated season where we haven't quite appreciated what he has done. He missed a couple of games, but he has been probably one of the better rookies in the terms of how he has performed so far this year on a consistent level. Hyatt's obviously been up and down. That has been helped by the quarterback situation. Banks has had some really good games. He's also had 1 or 2 kind of poorer games. But I do think JMS has been that kind of outstanding part of the offensive line that kind of hasn't got to a point where we've turned around and gone, oh God, look at JMS there. Like he's just been solid for what we do. I just feel like he's gonna keep that up. And we haven't had many bad snaps really, have we? To be honest, I know there was a few at the beginning, but we've generally been consistent since then.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, like you say, we've not really spoke about JMS much, but then at the same time, that's the best compliment you can pay an offensive lineman. Like like we've said before on this podcast, if you had a game,
sorry, Steve. At least it wasn't Shane picking an O-line player; it was me. Shane took O-line last week with Thomas.
I did it last week. I'm not doing it twice in a season. I'll tell you that for a fact. But yeah, like we've said before, if you have a game and you're not talking about the O-line, it's a good reason, because usually you only talk about the O-line when they've watched snaps or they've not created the running holes or they've given up pressures, like we'd spoke about them earlier in the season. I mean, I was just looking at JMS's stats this year. He's given up 3 sacks, 1 hit, 15 hurries for a rookie centre. For a rookie centre, I'm taking that. I mean, I'm not going to look into it, but I don't know how that compares to other interior offensive lineman rookies. But if you'd have offered me that, let's say he ends up with a stat line of 5 sacks, 3 hits, and 25 hurries. That's fine by me for a rookie. Especially when he missed time as well. But he's been everything we needed him to be and wanted him to be. And like you say, he doesn't get credit, but that's him not getting credit. He's getting credit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And while we're kind of wrapping this bit up before we get to predictions, so if you do have a prediction, make sure you get that into the comments and we'll read those out at the end. We do have the injury report from today. So this is, I've taken the injury report from Art Stapleton because there's a little kind of added extra bit of flavour text at the end. But Evan Neal is doubtful with his ankle injury, so it's unlikely that we see Evan Neal back this week. So it looks like it will probably be Phillips. There was the argument, however, that obviously Phillips has maybe been performing better than Neil has. And I know that Daves was asked whether Neil was going to be an instant starter once he is healthy again, and he didn't commit. But then again, knowing Daves as we know Daves now, I'm not surprised he didn't commit. Looking at questionable players, Dexter Lawrence with his hamstring injury, which is to be expected. Darren Waller with his hamstring injury, again, to be expected. But here's the kind of surprising one, is Justin Pugh apparently was limited today with a calf injury. So we will have to see about that one. He did say he expects Dex and Waller to play, but because of the Pugh one, he's not too sure. Pugh's been okay. I wouldn't say he's been fantastic, but again, he hasn't been horrible. He's had a few games where he's really shone, and then he's had a few games where there's been a few issues. But obviously, when we spoke to him earlier on this season, he's been playing at tackle. He's a guard. It probably comes under the same analogy that he said when, left tackle, right tackle kind of thing. Try wiping your ass with your left hand and tell me how it feels, sort of thing. He did say it's not always the easiest, but I actually think it would be a big miss on the line if Pugh doesn't play.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to remember, we never even anticipated having this conversation with Justin Pugh. We didn't expect him to be on the roster realistically. We had hopes for the likes of, Josh Azudu, maybe Marcus McKethan. Those kind of things haven't played out, along with a few other injuries. The one thing I am quite confident in, that if Justin is out, then it'll be a case of, you imagine it'll be Bredesen to left guard and then Glowinski at right guard. And Glowinski's another one who coming for a lot of criticism earlier on in the season, but kind of since he's been in, again, you've not really, unless it's the infamous number 64 is an eligible receiver, then you've not really heard Glowinski mentioned. So, again, that's another compliment you can pay. Just whilst we're talking about it, just to confirm New Orleans injury report as well, their game status. They've got Isaiah Foskey, the D end, out, Kendre Miller out, Peyton Turner out, and then questionable, they've got Chris Olave, Ryan Ramczyk, and Jamal Williams.
Okay, so Olave, despite not practicing at all this week so far, is questionable, which is interesting. I know it's an ankle injury that he's got, and players have come back and played on the ankle injury, but I think a lot of the players who tend to come back and play on ankle injuries are not wide receivers. And I think that there's a lot to be said about a wide receiver trying to play through an ankle injury. Yeah,
I mean, if I was to have a guess, I reckon it's the Saints just trying to keep us guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you looked at Olave, he's not practiced all week and he's questionable. All the other players that are questionable have been limited participation all week, and the other two players that are out did not practice this week. So I think it's maybe just a little bit of mind games with New Orleans.
Indeed. So it's that time of the evening where we get predictions. Now, my little spiel that I had in my head to warrant why I was doing what I was doing has been completely blown up by the Olave news that potentially he's not going to play. And if he, like we said, even if he does play, who knows what he's going to be like. It's probably not going to be ideal. So we spoke earlier on about the return of Waller, and the Giants are going to need all their playmakers to step up this week, especially in the passing game. The two teams have flip-flopped across their last 6 games, with the Giants winning the most recent game 27-21 in the Superdome in 2021. Just bear in mind, though, that the Giants still rank second bottom in scoring on the season, behind the Patriots, despite their 24 points scored last week. Now, because of that, it's probably highly unlikely that we will see a repeat of the 52-49 Saints win from 2015, which was the first win, I think, or the first game that me and Anna watched together. We really couldn't have asked for more of a shootout between the two teams. DeVito Mania, however, is taking over. Now, what I was going to say is maybe that we temper expectations a bit, and that up against a more solid secondary in the Saints, and then with players like Olave complementing Kamara, we might struggle. However, I am going to flip myself back across onto the Giants side and predict a Giants win 21-17, just because I think Olave is such a big miss for the Saints. Now, obviously, Kev and Dan, neither of them are here with us tonight. So Kev has also gone for a Giants win, 24-21. And as you would expect, Mr. Giants himself, Dan, I don't know if Dan's picked against the Giants in a game where it's a potential swing either way, but 23-13, Dan has gone for Shane. It is time. Is he going to be a lone wolf?
Am I going to be a lone wolf? I mean, hopefully everyone who watches, everyone who listens by now knows me very well, and I am indeed going to be a lone wolf. My logic is very, very simple. I've picked the Giants to lose for the last 3 weeks, and they've won for the last 3 weeks. Call it superstition, call it childish, call it ridiculous. I've got to keep riding that train. Like I had us to beat the Jets, and we lost. I had us to beat I had us to beat Washington. No, I had us to lose to Washington, and we won.
And we won.
Patriots had us to lose, and we won. Green Bay had us to lose, and we won. I'm literally what it just feels like at the minute. Whatever I say, the Giants did the opposite of. So I'm going Saints 24-17.
And you get the lovely little wolf howl. So
that is not me doing that for any listeners who might be thinking, "Man, that's a good impression."
Kieran's put Shane's excuses for the tank train incoming, and Steve has put it's not superstition, it's the Albion way.
Steve gets it. Probably Steve gets it. Never back your own team. Either way, to win, you back the Saints, put some money on it. Not that I condone betting. Put money on it. Saints win, okay, I'll get money. But if the Saints lose, well, my team's won. So I'm win-win either way.
So we've got a couple of listener predictions. Steve himself has gone for a Giants 27-24 win. And Kieran actually put something in here earlier that was quite interesting. He said, we have the momentum going into this 3 wins on the spin while they have only won 1 out of their last 4. Spread still have us at, and then he corrected himself at 5.5 there. So Kieran's going for a 24-16 win, which I think is probably the highest out or the sort of biggest spread across everything that's there. I believe that the Saints have only covered the spread a few times this year. I don't think they've covered the spread very many times. They've ended up losing a lot more than they've covered. And obviously with the record that they've got, what was their record? 6-7. That's not to be surprised, really. We do have one Saints to win 29-12, but just as a caveat, I work with Luke, and Luke's not an NFL fan, so he doesn't know what he's talking about. So yeah, there we have it. There is obviously Shane using his reverse psychology. He's not superstitious, he's just a little stitious. And then the rest of us going for the G-men. Now, unfortunately, that is all we have time for this week. However, we'll be back next week to review the Saints game and obviously let you know how our first pod trip to Dublin went. Myself and Dan are flying tomorrow at, I think it's 12:10, and we'll try and document a few things on Twitter and on TikTok, just what we're up to. We've got a Guinness Storehouse tour tomorrow afternoon, and then we're probably going to try and find somewhere to watch the evening games, maybe at Buskers or maybe just wherever we end up finding ourselves in Temple Bar area. then obviously just remember on the Sunday we'll be in Buskers from 5 o'clock. We'll have our own little section. Come and find us. We've got a few giveaways. We've also got a couple of t-shirts left over from the trip to New York. So come and find us and you can have one of those. Anything you want to add before we go, Shane?
Yes, I don't want to extend it too long, but just a quick question I've got for you. So I meant to cover this at the start of the episode and completely forgot. Tommy DeVito. What do the Giants have, Craig? I feel me and Kev spoke about it the other day, and I meant to ask you at the very start, and I completely forgot about it, and I want to get it in there, kind of whilst it's in my mind, because it'll just completely go next week, unless like, obviously Tommy gets another dub under his belt. But just not to prolong all the viewers listening to me and you for much longer. Like, it's not going to be another 15-20 minutes, don't worry. But I just wondered what your thoughts were on Tommy DeVito.
I think that it's multifaceted how everything's gone with Tommy DeVito. I feel like the Giants didn't trust him to pass in that Jets game, and I think that spoke volumes in what they'd actually seen from him and the fact that they had no idea that this was going to happen. They just assumed that Tyrod would be fine, he would sit on the bench, and Tommy would get a little bit of exposure, which is why there probably wasn't even a game plan in place, really, other than if you have to come in, we're going to run the ball. And it just happened so early in the game that it kind of screwed the Giants over. Now, what we've seen since from Tommy is actually something that a lot of people said that they saw. Where was it he went to college?
I think, excuse me, I can't remember. I think he transferred. Syracuse was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Was it Syracuse in Illinois, maybe?
But a lot of people have said that he came out of college. He had power in the arm. He had a high completion percentage. He threw for a lot of yards. Like, not every college quarterback will make it in the NFL. We've seen that. We've seen big names fail. We've seen small names become backups and be laughed off the field every time they come on. There is something there. And as much as I credit it to DeVito and how he is as a player, I think we also need to tip our hat to Kafka and to Dable, because what they've been able to do in such a short amount of time to turn him from what we saw against the Jets to then what we saw against the Cowboys and the Commanders, where he was just being sacked, holding onto the ball too long. His pocket awareness was awful, to whatever we saw Monday night, which almost seemed like the complete package. And the fact that he led a game-winning drive at the end of that game is not something in our wildest dreams we would have thought of, knowing that Tommy was still going to be out there. They've left Tyrod on the bench. They obviously want to see what Tommy's got. And I'll be honest, what he's showing is the ability to maybe cause some difficult conversations in the postseason, depending on how he goes. Now, I do agree with some of the beat writers' comments that, okay, we maybe need to move on from this Italian stuff, this jersey stuff, and maybe just let the kid play, and let's not turn him into a sideshow, because he's shown that he's much, much more than that. And yeah, he can buy into it as much as he wants and he can play on it, but I think at some point he needs to turn around and just go, and he has kind of done that in some of the interviews this week, where you could kind of hear in his voice he's a little bit exacerbated about being asked constantly about Cutlets and his family and all of that. But I mean, let's be honest, his agent doesn't help matters, does he? Because he looks straight out of The Godfather.
Yeah.
Beautiful. But even like Jimmy Fallon now is making up songs on his Tonight Show. It brings good publicity to the Giants. I just feel like if it goes sour, it also brings bad publicity. But if there's something there, and if anybody is going to be able to unlock it with a full preseason, it's Dave's. And I think Kafka's part of that, which is actually why I actually would like Kafka to stick around in the summer, if possible, because I feel like it's not just Dave's who's had a hand in this.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously Shay Tini as well, someone we were speaking about before we came on air.
Yeah. And Kieran said, it feels like DeVito's a very level-headed lad, and thinks, as I've said, Dave's has to take some credit. Our coaching staff has to take credit there, because without them, there isn't a game plan in place that is there for him to succeed. And what they've drawn up for him is bloody working.
Yeah, and just on one last note on that, how great was that celebration that kind of shared on when Randy kicked that field goal? The way they were like just kind of hugging each other, and then obviously I believe Tommy ran off to go and congratulate Randy for kicking the game-winning field goal. Just a kind of great moment to see. Like it's that kind of stuff we've not seen too often this season. So when it does happen, you just need to wait. Go on.
When I say as well about we need to sort of move on from the Italian stuff and the Jersey stuff and stuff like that, I'm more looking at like the beat writers and kind of the external people. But from fans, I think we can carry on doing this when Joe Shane is pictured in the locker room doing that with the rest of the team. I think we're allowed to keep doing the hand gesture. I don't think it has a proper name, the hand gesture. I've heard someone call it a high five, but Tommy then went, well, no, it's not a high five, is it?
No, I think Tommy was like, it's a,
Yeah.
So everyone just do the,
Yeah, just do the and we know what we're going on.
But that's just, excuse me, that was just one question I meant to ask you at the start of the episode. And hopefully when Dan's back with us next week, we can follow the same question at Dan, because obviously both myself and Kev mentioned it the other day. I just want to get your thoughts on it, and I'll get Dan's on it as well. But other than that, I've got nothing else to add. Other than, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend in Ireland. Good, I can't be there for a couple of different reasons, but I'm looking forward to seeing. You by all means blow the group chat up that we've got with pictures and videos and whatnot. Looking forward to seeing what the venue looks like, the attendance you get, and obviously give my best wishes to Brian as well, because I'm good. I can't meet Brian because I feel like I always keep missing the opportunity to meet Brian. I've got a lot of time for him, so pass on my best wishes to him. I hope you guys have a safe flight, incredible time, and I look forward to hearing all about it on the day and on next week's podcast as well.
Yeah, cheers, buddy. Now, obviously, before we go, just remember to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified when we go live, especially when somebody schedules it for 8:30 in the morning and not in the evening. Obviously, if you aren't, follow us on the socials down below. We are also on TikTok, and we have our Etsy shop, etsy.com/BigBlueUKIRL. My thanks, as ever, goes to Shane for joining me. To all of you watching and listening on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, we are signing off. Until next time, let's go Giants.